Welcome everyone to Weekend Escapades. Today's adventure brings us to Ghost Town, Goodsprings, Nevada, where the Pioneer Saloon lives and also the original general store. They are two of the buildings that are still active and still here in town. We will go over those in our next video in detail. Today we are just looking at all of the abandoned buildings in Goodsprings, and it is a ghost town. Now, Goodsprings is located 45 minutes south of Las Vegas. It's just off the I-15, a few miles, and it is riddled with old buildings here. Now, they're saying that this town was built on tin from Sears and Roebuck catalog. And when you look at these buildings, they are covered in tin. You can see the old construction and the way they were put together here. This was obviously a cabin or like a sleeping quarters. One of the a few people that we had talked to had said that these could have been a cabin for the ladies of the night, as they were right across from the saloon. But there are quite a few foundations right here on this property. Could not find the details as to what the foundations were for. But this is obviously a big shop. You can see all of the slots or shelving where they kept parts, and there's still some things laying in there. And it's kind of fallen apart at the backside, but still an amazing building to see. The old wood floor that's there, and there's also a large motor in the next building that we're going to see, the Rock Building, and that is a really heavily built structure with a really neat old roof on it. But you'll see when we look inside here, this building was the big wood floor, the big heavy door that's on the front of it. And then there's a couple of motors and things in here. And I was told that these were used in the mines. One of the lift motors here off on the right there. So there's still a lot of old iron and machinery that's laying around in some of these buildings. But these are just a couple of the buildings that were right there at the beginning of town. And these were not fenced off. So there's a few buildings in here that have fences around them, but you can still get close. And also there's some placards, some stone placards calling out some of the buildings. I just didn't see anything for this one, and I think that this one looks really neat the way it is aging. So the way it's aging there just looks kind of creepy, and definitely Old West and ghost town for sure. Now this town was named after Joseph Good, and it was called Goodsprings. And he had a cattle operation here where he raised cattle. So now the town is shortened to Goodsprings. This was the original post office. So one of the locals there, I met them there on the street in front of their home. They said this was the original post office, and at least we can get this close to it. It said no trespassing. I respect that. I was going to walk around the back of it, but I just didn't want to walk on property from somebody. Maybe it was there and private to them. But it's all open to walk on. Now this right here was the old water holding area, and they used to fill the fire trucks right here in this location. So the building right in front of it, it's all covered in newer tin, but that is where they had all the water for the fire trucks. And this was an old wind-powered pump. So this would draw the water out of the ground when it turned with the wind and fill that with water. And there is the, of course, fan that was on that. It was laying on the ground next to it. I'm 90% positive that's the fan that was on it. And here's one of the shops that were right there on this property. Now this property was fenced, and it says beware a dog. Didn't see a dog, but I wanted to be careful. Now, this is the Cottonwood Cabin. There's so much to list here. So the Cottonwood Cabin, you can see it's next to this giant cottonwood tree. And as I say, the biggest tree in town is the one that could tell the most stories because it saw all of the history in this town. Now you can definitely drive through Goodsprings and see all of these buildings, but I think it's really nice to walk. And when you meet local people to tell you about these things, this was an original miner's cabin and a shop that is next to it there on the right. This is the shop with the sliding door, and the cabin. This is the outhouse that's out back, still standing. Not much leg room in there, but that is the outhouse that is behind those two buildings that still stand on property. And you can even see this building that was in the background. So this is an old shop and shed. And then again, miners' cabins in areas where they did a little bit of mining work and machine shops. And look at this 2-story tin building. Now this looks like a dwelling. It has a door, it has windows, and talk about an old school tiny home. And then on this property there's another foundation in the back that's heavy stone where they had another building that was built there. So there's just absolutely no shortage of ghost town finds right here in Goodsprings. I was just super excited to see all this because like with Calico Ghost Town, all the buildings are restored, but here in Goodsprings they still exist in their natural state. So there's no shortage again of great. And I found this really interesting. This was on somebody's property, obviously hand built. They built this thing, and look at it turning. I was kind of fascinated. I hope you enjoy it because it was a fascinating find there on the property. I had to take a close-up of this thing. So neat stuff here in Goodsprings. This property was for sale. Kind of fascinating, but you could actually buy a property here and become part of this ghost town and restore some of these old buildings. I'll tell you, Goodsprings to me, it obviously has a tourist attraction with the saloon and the general store there that's very popular. But I think there's a couple of areas here where people could definitely put like a tiny home or rejuvenate this and have a place for people to come and stay and experience this ghost town like overnight and really bring this back to life. Now these are a couple of the miners' cabins that are right out in front of the Campbell Stone Cabin. And we saw a sign there for the Campbell Stone Cabin. And right here is that cabin. And now this is a simply built cabin. It's a structure made of dry laid rocks, and it was built by the investors. So the promoter, right? So A.G. Campbell, Jonas Taylor, William Smith. They were all wealthy prospectors in the area, and it was built in 1886. Again, it's the oldest standing building in the town. So here's a ghost town story that is actually true. In 1893, the first post office was established at the Keystone Mine, which also had the distinction of being taken over by the miners 2 years later in a dispute over wages. The miners held the mine for 3 months until enough money had been made to pay both their wages as well as the wages for local Indians who had been cutting wood to shore up the mines here in Goodsprings, Nevada. Now here's the Goodsprings School. This was built in 1913, and you can see the original photo, and of course some happy kids there at school having a good time, and here it is now. The shape is still there, but you can see it's been reworked and remodeled, but they've done a great job. Been standing since 1913. So here is the Goodsprings Cemetery and the location of Joseph Faley. He is the one that built the Pioneer Saloon and also the 2-story hotel that is no longer there because it burnt down, but the Pioneer Saloon and the general store still exist. Now this Pioneer Cemetery is like many of the others we have seen. A lot of unmarked graves, but still well taken care of. And you can see the view of the surrounding mountains from this location. It is located on the right as you are pulling into town. We hope you enjoyed our adventure to Goodsprings, Nevada, and stay tuned for our next one because we are going to explore the Pioneer Saloon and its haunted tales. Until our next adventure, goodbye from Weekend Escapades.